Broken Heart: How I Found Love Again. I still remember the moment when my world came crashing down. It was a rainy afternoon, and I was standing in our kitchen, staring at the text on my phone. 4 simple words: we need to talk. My heart sank into my stomach. I knew what was coming, but I wasn't prepared for the pain that would follow. Mark and I had been together for 5 years. He was my everything, my first real love, my best friend, the person I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. We had dreams together, plans for the future. We talked about marriage, about buying a house, about starting a family. And yet, standing in that kitchen, I realized that everything I thought I knew was a lie. When he walked through the door later that evening, his face was already clouded with guilt. He wouldn't meet my eyes. My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I tried to prepare myself for the words I didn't want to hear. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't do this anymore." It felt like the floor beneath me had given way, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I wanted to scream, to beg him to stay, to tell him that we could fix whatever was wrong. But I didn't say anything. I just stood there, frozen in shock as my world unraveled before me. Mark told me that he had met someone else, someone who made him feel alive again, who made him question everything about our relationship. He didn't want to hurt me, he said. But it was too late. His words were knives, cutting deep into my heart with each confession. I could barely breathe as he told me he was leaving. The days after that were a blur of tears, sleepless nights, and endless questions. I couldn't understand how everything had fallen apart so quickly. How had I missed the signs? How had I not seen that Mark was slipping away from me? I replayed every moment in my head, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong. For weeks, I stayed inside, avoiding friends, avoiding life. I didn't want to face the world without Mark. I didn't want to face the reality that the person I had built my life around was gone, that the future I had envisioned no longer existed. But as the weeks turned into months, something inside me shifted. I realized that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of my broken heart. Mark was gone, and no amount of tears or regret could bring him back. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to find a way to move forward, I had to start picking up the pieces of my life. It wasn't easy. The pain didn't disappear overnight. There were still moments when I would wake up in the middle of the night, my heart aching with the memory of him. There were still days when I couldn't stop thinking about what we had lost. But little by little, I started to find myself again. I threw myself into my work, taking on projects that challenged me and pushed me out of my comfort zone. I reconnected with old friends, the ones I had drifted away from during my relationship with Mark. I started going out more, saying yes to invitations instead of hiding away at home. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened. I met someone. His name was Jason. We met through mutual friends at a dinner party. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't even sure I was ready to date again. But there was something about him that drew me in. He was kind, funny, and easy to talk to. He didn't push, didn't try to rush things. We spent hours talking that night, sharing stories, laughing over silly jokes. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of something new. Over the next few weeks, Jason and I started seeing each other more often. We went on casual dates, coffee shops, movie nights, long walks in the park. It was simple, easy, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. But as much as I liked Jason, there was still a part of me that was afraid of getting hurt again, afraid that I wasn't ready, that my heart was still too broken to fully let someone else in. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Jason to tell me that he wasn't interested, or that he had found someone else, just like Mark had. I had built walls around my heart, and I wasn't sure if I could let them down. Then one night, as we sat together on my couch, Jason turned to me, his eyes serious. "I know you've been through a lot," he said quietly. "I know you're scared, but I'm not him. I'm not going to hurt you." His words hit me like a wave. I hadn't told Jason much about my past with Mark, but somehow he knew. He saw the fear in my eyes, the hesitation in my heart, and instead of pushing me away, Instead of walking away when things got hard, he stayed. He wanted to be there for me, even when I wasn't sure I deserved it. That night, I realized something important. Jason wasn't Mark. He wasn't going to leave me, wasn't going to betray me the way I had been hurt before. He was patient, kind, and understanding. He wanted to help me heal, to show me that love didn't have to be painful. Slowly, I began to let him in. I told him about Mark, about the heartbreak, about how I wasn't sure if I could ever trust someone again. And instead of running, Jason stayed. He listened. He held me when I cried, reassured me when I doubted myself. In time, the walls around my heart began to crumble. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find love again. That the pain I had experienced with Mark didn't define me, didn't define my future. There was still so much love left to give, so much life left to live. With Jason, things were different. Our relationship wasn't built on grand gestures or sweeping promises. It was built on trust, on communication, on the simple, everyday moments that made me feel safe and cherished. He didn't try to fill the void that Mark had left. He helped me find a new path, a new sense of happiness that was just for me. One night, as we sat on a beach watching the sunset, Jason took my hand and looked at me, his expression serious. "You're the strongest person I know," he said softly. "You've been through so much, but you still have so much love to give. I'm lucky to be a part of your life." Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at him, realizing in that moment just how far I had come. I had been shattered, broken by the person I thought I would spend forever with. But through that pain, I had found a way to heal, to rebuild myself, and to open my heart again. "I'm lucky to have you too," I whispered, squeezing his hand. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the water, I knew that I had found something beautiful. I had found love again, not because someone else had saved me, but because I had saved myself. I had learned that even after heartbreak, even after the worst kind of pain, love could still bloom. It wasn't the love I had imagined for myself all those years ago with Mark, but it was real, it was strong, and it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole again. As Jason and I sat on the beach, the gentle waves lapping at the shore, the warmth of his hand in mine felt like an anchor grounding me. The soft hues of the fading sun reflected on the water, but my mind was racing, flooded with memories of the past and the uncertain path that lay ahead. For so long, I had been defined by the pain Mark left behind. The scars of that heartbreak had shaped how I saw love, how I approached any new possibility of happiness. Every time Jason touched my hand or looked at me with that quiet intensity, I felt a tug in my chest, part longing, part fear. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did. I could feel it in the way my heart quickened when I saw his name flash on my phone, or in the comfort I found when we were together. But opening myself up to love again felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, daring the ground beneath me to crumble. Jason seemed to sense the shift in my mood. He turned to me, his gaze soft but concerned. "You've been quiet," he said gently, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I swallowed hard, unsure of how to express the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Part of me wanted to shut down, to pull away like I had so many times before. But something in the way he looked at me made me want to be honest, to let him in, even though I wasn't sure I knew how to. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy, like they had been buried inside me for too long. "I'm scared of letting myself be happy again. I'm scared of what happens if I lose you." Jason's eyes softened further, and without hesitation, he wrapped his arm around me, pulling me closer. I rested my head on his shoulder, my heart pounding as I waited for his response. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe for him to tell me I was being unreasonable, that I needed to let go of the past, but he didn't do that. Instead, he took a deep breath and said, "I get it, I do. What you went through with Mark, that kind of pain doesn't just disappear, and I'm not here to pretend it never happened. But I'm not him. I don't plan on leaving, and I'm not looking for reasons to walk away." I closed my eyes, trying to absorb his words, but the fear still lingered. The voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "What if?" refused to quiet down. What if I gave Jason my heart only for it to break all over again? What if I let myself be vulnerable, only to be left behind once more? Jason seemed to sense my hesitation, and he shifted slightly so that we were facing each other. "Look," he said softly, cupping my face in his hands. "I know trusting, doesn't come easy for you, and that's okay. I'm not expecting you to just flip a switch and be fine, but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." I blinked back, tears, a mix of relief and guilt washing over me. "I don't want to hurt you, Jason," I whispered. "I don't want to be stuck in the past forever, but sometimes it's hard to let go." He nodded, his thumbs brushing gently against my cheeks. "Healing doesn't have a timeline. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I just want you to let me in when you're ready." We sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I realized that for so long I had been carrying the burden of my past alone, afraid to let anyone see how broken I still felt. But Jason wasn't asking me to be whole. He was offering to help me piece myself back together. "I'm trying," I finally said, my voice shaky but honest. "I'm trying to let go of the fear. It's hard." Jason smiled, a soft, reassuring smile that made the knot in my chest loosen just a little. "That's all I can ask for. We'll take it one step at a time, okay? There's no rush." I nodded, feeling a small flicker of hope start to bloom inside me. Maybe it wouldn't be easy, and maybe there would still be moments of doubt and fear. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in it. Jason wasn't just someone I had fallen in love with. He was someone who wanted to stand by me, even through the messiness and uncertainty. As the sun dipped lower beneath the horizon, casting the beach in twilight shadows, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I wasn't fully healed yet, but maybe that was okay. Healing didn't have to be linear, and love didn't have to be perfect to be real. In the weeks that followed, Jason and I continued to grow closer. There were moments when the fear still crept in, when I would catch myself overanalyzing every word, every gesture, convinced that history was going to repeat itself. But Jason was patient. He didn't push when I needed space, but he also didn't let me retreat too far into my shell. Slowly, I began to trust him more, not just with my heart, but with the parts of myself that were still raw, still fragile. One night, after a particularly vulnerable conversation about my fears, Jason turned to me and said, "You know, I didn't think I could find love after my last relationship either." His words surprised me. Jason rarely talked about his past, and I had assumed it was because he didn't want to dwell on it. But now he seemed ready to share. "I was engaged once," he said quietly, his eyes distant as he stared at the ceiling. "It ended badly. She left me for someone else, and for a long time I thought it was my fault. That maybe I wasn't enough." I reached for his hand, feeling a pang of empathy. I had no idea. He shrugged, a sad smile on his lips. "I didn't talk about it much because it hurt too much. But then I met you, and for the first time I felt like I could breathe again. Like maybe I didn't have to be perfect to be loved." His words struck a chord deep inside me. In that moment, I realized that we were both healing from past wounds, both learning to trust again. We weren't perfect, but we were enough for each other. And that was all that mattered. As we lay there together, the weight of our shared vulnerabilities hanging in the air, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. I could see a future with Jason. A future built on honesty, trust, and a love that wasn't about being flawless, but about being real. And for the first time since Mark left, I realized that I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of love, not of heartbreak. I had survived before, and if it came to it, I could survive again. But more importantly, I had found someone worth taking the risk for. In Jason's arms, I found the courage to love again, not despite my broken heart, but because of it. And in that love, I found the strength to finally let go of the past and embrace the future, one that was filled with hope, possibility, and the kind of love that didn't need perfection to be real. This time I was ready. This time I believed. The months that followed were a strange mix of joy and trepidation. Jason and I grew closer, and every day with him felt like a small miracle. I'd wake up to the warmth of his presence, and in those moments, I would forget about the shadows lurking behind my heart. We shared laughter, dreams, and plans that I hadn't dared to imagine after everything that happened with Mark. But as our relationship deepened, so did the quiet fear that gnawed at the edges of my happiness. It was as though the more I let Jason in, the more vulnerable I became, and the more afraid I was of losing him. The wounds from my past, the betrayal that had shattered me before, still lingered. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the creeping thought that this was all too good to last. Jason was everything I had ever wanted: kind, patient, thoughtful. He loved me in a way that felt pure and uncomplicated, yet the love I gave in return was stained with doubt. He deserved someone whole, someone unburdened by the weight of old scars, and I was starting to wonder if I would ever be that person. One cold evening in late autumn, as the leaves had started to fall and the air carried the bite of winter, we sat by the fireplace in his apartment. He held me close, his arm around my shoulders as we talked about the future. It should have felt comforting, but instead, a deep sadness settled in my chest. "I've been thinking," Jason said softly, his voice laced with excitement. "Maybe we could start looking for a place together. You know, something that's ours." My heart clenched, and I could feel the walls I had worked so hard to tear down beginning to rebuild themselves. The idea of moving in together, of taking that next step, should have filled me with happiness, but instead, all I felt was dread. I turned to face him, forcing a smile. "That sounds nice," I said, but my voice lacked the enthusiasm I knew he was hoping for. I saw the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but he didn't push. Jason never did. Later that night, as I lay in bed beside him, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were spiraling, the familiar darkness creeping in. I loved Jason. I knew that with every part of me. But what if I wasn't enough for him? What if I was too damaged to give him the kind of love he deserved? What if, one day, he realized that I could never be the woman he needed me to be? The weight of those questions became too much to bear, and before I knew it, I was crying silently into my pillow. I tried to stifle the sobs, not wanting to wake him, but the pain was too deep, too raw. I didn't even notice when Jason stirred beside me until I felt his hand on my back, gently pulling me into his arms. "Hey," he whispered, his voice heavy with sleep but filled with concern. "What's wrong?" I couldn't answer at first. The words lodged in my throat. I didn't want to burden him with my fears, didn't want him to see how broken I still was inside. But Jason had a way of knowing, of understanding me even when I didn't understand myself. "I'm scared," I finally admitted, my voice trembling. "I don't know if I can do this, if I can be enough for you." Jason's brow furrowed in confusion, and he pulled back slightly to look at me. "What are you talking about? You are enough, more than enough." I shook my head, wiping away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. "I don't know how to let go of the past. I'm still so afraid of losing you, of being hurt again. It's like no matter how hard I try, I can't shake this feeling that I'm going to mess everything up." Jason sighed, a pained look crossing his face as he brushed his thumb against my cheek. "You're not going to lose me," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." But deep down, I didn't believe him. Not because I didn't trust Jason, but because I didn't trust myself. I had been broken before, and despite my best efforts, I still felt the weight of that betrayal hanging over me. I was terrified that one day, Jason would see the cracks beneath the surface and realize I wasn't the person he thought I was. In the days that followed, the distance between us began to grow. I didn't mean for it to happen, but every time Jason mentioned the future, moving in together, meeting his family, taking the next step, I found myself pulling back, retreating into the safety of my own walls. I didn't know how to explain to him that I was afraid of happiness. afraid of what would happen if I let myself believe that this love was real. One evening, after yet another tense conversation about the future, Jason turned to me, his eyes filled with sadness. "I feel like you're slipping away from me," he said quietly. "Like no matter what I do, I can't reach you." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to tell him that he was wrong, that I wasn't slipping away, that I wanted nothing more than to be with him. But the truth was, he was right. I was slipping away, caught in the web of my own fears and insecurities. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't mean to. I don't know how to let go of everything that happened." Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what else I can do to prove to you that I'm not going to hurt you. I've been patient, I've given you space, but it feels like nothing I do is enough." Tears welled up in my eyes as I listened to him. He was right. Jason had been nothing but kind and understanding. But no matter how hard he tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't worthy of the love he offered me. "I don't want to hurt you," I said softly, my heart aching with the weight of my own words. "But I'm so scared that I'll never be able to give you the kind of love you deserve." Jason looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and heartbreak. "You already do," he said quietly. "You just don't believe it." For a long moment we sat in silence, the unspoken words hanging heavy between us. I knew that Jason loved me, and I loved him too, but the fear inside me was too strong, too deeply rooted. I didn't know how to fix it, didn't know how to make myself whole again. That night, as Jason held me close, I realized with a sinking feeling that I might not be able to save us. No matter how much I wanted to believe in our love, the ghosts of my past were still haunting me, pulling me down into the darkness. And I wasn't sure if I could ever break free. Days turned into weeks, and though Jason and I continued to share moments of happiness, the distance between us grew. It was as though an invisible barrier had formed between us, one that neither of us knew how to break through. One evening, after a long, intense silence, Jason finally spoke the words I had been dreading. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you, but I can't keep fighting for us alone." My heart shattered at his words, and I felt the familiar sting of tears in my eyes. I wanted to tell him that I would try harder, that I could fix things, but deep down I knew the truth. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay, couldn't keep ignoring the cracks that were growing between us. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "But I don't know how to be the person you need me to be." Jason looked at me, his eyes filled with pain. "I don't need you to be perfect," he said softly. "I just need you to believe in us. But if you can't, I don't know how we move forward." I couldn't respond. The weight of my own fear, my own insecurities was too heavy. And as I sat there, unable to find the words to make things right, I knew that I was losing him. In the end, it wasn't Jason who left. It was me. I couldn't bear the thought of dragging him down into my darkness any longer, couldn't stand the idea of him waiting for me to heal when I didn't know if I ever would. So I did the only thing I thought I could do. I let him go. As I walked away from the only man who had ever truly seen me, truly loved me, I felt the familiar ache of heartbreak settle in my chest. This time, though, it was different. This time, I wasn't just mourning the loss of a relationship. I was mourning the loss of myself. And as the days passed and the silence grew louder, I realized that the hardest part of loving someone isn't the fear of losing them. It's the fear of losing yourself in the process.